What's up, guys? It's Toad back with another episode of Better Off Dead. They never end. College football week 7. I've been on a nice losing streak, as you've seen in baseball and hockey, which has been awesome since my amazing 3-0 NFL weekend and 3-0 day on Sunday, which included a baseball play on the Twins, I believe, won on Sunday. The only game that they won. I've been having a rough go of it the last few days. I think I lost on the Twins twice. Of course, I lost to them today because, of course, Urquidy has to come up with like a decent performance for once and beat me in that game. So Houston Astros advanced 3-2. Great, great for me losing on the Twins as a favorite. So that's awesome. And of course, I was right about my Bruins and didn't actually bet it. Which would have been a little bit dicey, I guess, as far as like laying the puck line on that, but they did win by 2 goals. So I didn't see the game because I was doing the Tower Gang show, but yeah, go Bruins. At least I was right about that. I was right about New Mexico State tonight, even though that got a little bit dicey near the end. I think Sam Houston State at least almost cut it to 7 or something. I don't know. I wasn't watching that either, but whatever. We move on from it. That Phillies loss was really the bad one that I had a couple days ago against the Braves. Phillies won today, by the way, which is crazy, a crazy blowout win. And the Dodgers are eliminated, I believe. Yeah, such a shame. The Dodgers, who I do not like, of course, they're out of it. Yeah, real shame there. They get kind of embarrassed by the Arizona Diamondbacks. Yeah, you really hate to see it. But the Phillies loss that I took against the Braves the other day, where the Phillies were winning 4-1 into the 7th, 4-0 into the 6th, whatever, and then they wind up losing the game in the 8th inning, and then they get my hopes up again in the top of the 9th. I think they had at least 1 base runner on, maybe even 2, and they hit into this absolutely ridiculous double play where it was a deep ball to the outfield, and it was like an 8-4-5 double play or 8-5-4 double play. Just some crazy double play that kind of ended the game there for the Phillies. I think it was something that had never happened in like a playoff game or National League playoff game before, like that specific type of double play. You don't often see double plays that involve the outfielder making the play and then throwing it into the infield and getting somebody out, one of the base runners out that way. Just crazy stuff. I think I'm taking some bad beats. I don't think my analysis is wrong on most of these. I'll admit it if it is, but it's not like I'm getting like completely wrecked in these games or whatever. I was wrong about Urquidy tonight as far as how well he would pitch, so there was that. We move on, though, to college football, week 7. And this is a week where I thought I was going to have like an easier time finding some plays because there were teams where, based on what they did last week, I'm like immediately looking to go against them. Like Georgia Tech, they upset Miami as like a 20.5 or 21-point underdog. And I don't know if you saw that game, but the way Georgia Tech won that game, this is just hilarious, man. I think Miami made like a pretty big comeback in that game. Of course, they were like the huge favorite, the much better team. They came back, took the lead, and then, or I think did they take the lead? I don't even know, but they made like a huge comeback and almost won the game. Yeah, they did. I think they did take the lead, and they, at the end of the game, they could have just kneeled to run out the clock, and instead, I don't know, man, Cristobal, Miami's coach, he decided to run the football. Why? No one knows. You'd have to be completely insane or have no concept of like the context of the game, the situation that you're in. Did he not realize that literally you can just kneel and the game is over? I think it was on 3rd and 10. It made no sense at all. He runs it, and they actually fumbled the ball over, and Georgia Tech wound up winning that game. So after that, like, that's a crazy upset, just absolutely ridiculous set of circumstances there. I was looking to go against Georgia Tech, but of course, they're on bye this week, so great. I might look to go against them in the next game if we think that they've been letting that huge upset like simmer throughout the week or whatever. We'll see about that. And then I was also looking to go against Oklahoma or even perhaps Texas because they were in the Red River rivalry last week, and Oklahoma wound up pulling off the upset in that Big game there. That's a big win. You look to go against Oklahoma after they have a huge win like that because you think they're going to be in a letdown spot. Oh, but they're on bye as well. So that's just great. So we lose the benefit of having those two situations this week. But there are some other situations, and we're going to get into them now. Let's talk about them because this video might wind up taking a while. And one of those situations is another one where I looked at a certain team like right away looking to go against them this week, and oh, they're not on bye, so I can actually go against them this week. And you're gonna think this is hideous, horrendous. Everybody's gonna be like, why would you do this to yourselves, man? This is like one of the ugliest plays that you can possibly conceive of in college football. Pittsburgh +8. They're a team with very little offense. They basically don't even have quarterback. Just a complete mess on offense. Why would I want to do this? Why would I want to take Pittsburgh +8? Well, let's look into it a little bit more here. Well, one of the things that I wanted to look at right away here was that Louisville, I was looking to go against them right away because Louisville last week, well, and we can look at the market here quickly. Louisville's got 58% of the tickets, but 50% of the money coming in opposite them. And you can see this line actually looks like it was 10 at one point, but I don't know if that was like the week before or not because I never saw the 10. I got it at +8. You might still be able to get the 8. It's 7.5 right now. I think +7.5 is still fine as long as you get that key number above 7 and get that hook there, 7.5. But this market read is telling me that there are bigger bets coming in on Pittsburgh here. But that being said, why am I looking to go against Louisville here? What did they do last week, Louisville? They played Notre Dame, big game, playing against the number 10 ranked team in the country, and they had a big win. They beat Notre Dame. I believe it was a primetime game, late night on Saturday, I believe. They vaulted up in the rankings to being ranked number 14. They're undefeated, and they're coming off that huge win. I think they're going to be in letdown mode, man, and that was kind of a misleading final there in the Notre Dame game, really. I think the game was a bit closer than it appears. Notre Dame turned the ball over 5 times in that game. Like, if you have, I think Louisville was +4 in turnovers in that game. If you're +4 in turnovers, if you turn the opposing team over 5 times in a game, you better win that game. and based on that, it's like Louisville didn't even win by as much as they should have based on the turnover discrepancy in that game. But even, all that aside, that's a big win. They're coming off that big win there, and I mentioned the turnovers because it makes Louisville look a little bit better than maybe they actually are because they had the benefit of those turnovers and some bad mistakes by Notre Dame. So Louisville's coming off that game. Before that, they played NC State in kind of a close game, which is somewhat of a big game, another ACC game there. So Louisville's got that. They're coming off that Notre Dame game. They have to go to Pitt, which is only their second true road game of the year. And who do they have up next? Even though they do have a bye next week, their next game after this is going to be against number 17 ranked Duke. And we've seen Duke. They've been playing well. They're a ranked team. They're a one-loss team right now. That's a much bigger game as well. This is a sandwich spot, I would say, for Louisville. They're in a letdown spot coming off that big win against Notre Dame. The stock couldn't really be higher on Louisville at this point, being undefeated, being ranked 16th in the country. And really, if you look at their schedule, they haven't really done much that's that impressive. I mean, barely beating Georgia Tech, not winning by that much against Indiana. Like, really? I don't know, man. I think, the stock is as high as it's going to get on Louisville here. And on the other side, on the Pitt side, it can't really get any worse. It can't get lower for Pitt. And I think Pitt has a little bit of an advantage here because that's going to give you some value on Pitt because they've looked so awful. But they have lost to some okay teams. West Virginia's been playing pretty well. Cincinnati, and those are fairly close losses. I mean, there's not that much shame in losing those games there and losing to North Carolina. I mean, North Carolina's a pretty good team that can score a lot. The one really embarrassing loss here is Pitt losing to Virginia Tech, which Virginia Tech is very down this year. They're not good, and I think Pitt is going to actually benefit from this because they had a bye after that. They were off last week, so they have the extra week to prepare. They've been able to prepare for Louisville. And if you think about that Virginia Tech situation that they were in that game. That was really a sandwich spot for them there because they were coming off a pretty big game against North Carolina, and they had the Louisville game on deck there. So maybe they just weren't totally focused for the Virginia Tech game. I think you can put that result aside a little bit. Pittsburgh is not as bad as they look in that one game, and I think that bye is going to help them kind of get out of this funk that they've been in, help them like kind of reset, recalibrate. Extra week to focus on this game where Louisville doesn't have that extra week. They're coming off a big game that they played last week. There are a lot of advantages for Pittsburgh here, and I think this is Pittsburgh's homecoming game here. So there's, the fans are going to be up for it, I would have to imagine. I think it's a good spot for Pittsburgh, even though their offense sucks. It's a really bad offense. Pittsburgh they are getting a ton of points here. They're getting the 8 points. They have a decent defense at least. So when you're a team that plays defense to some extent, you're getting that many points at home, and the stock is as low as it can be on you, and it's as high as it can be on your opponent, and your opponent's in a bad spot, and you're in a much better spot. All that lines up for me. As a play on Pittsburgh, as ugly as it is, you can make fun of me for it if you want. We'll see what happens when it comes to game time. And these are all going to be evening games. It's going to be weird having all my games be in the Saturday evening slate, but that's the way it worked out. I like Pittsburgh. I'm on them +8, +7.5. I think it's still a fine way to go here. I think it's one of the best spots of the week, to be honest. And it's playing those ugly teams like that, the ones that just feel like so wrong, like you almost can't even do it. You almost can't even bring yourself to make that bet. Those tend to be like some of the better plays to make. So I like Pitt. I like them +8. That's going to be the first play that I talk about here. Next up, maybe an easier one to stomach, and I almost questioned it a little bit, but there were some circumstances where I was like, I think I got to do this. Washington State -8, and it looks like the line has actually gone down a little bit from like a 10 maybe. So if you look at what's going on with Washington State here, or no, it looks like only it's gone down from 8.5 to 7.5, but or 8. I laid 8. I couldn't find a 7.5, but not much of a difference between 7.5 and 8, unless it goes below the 7.5. You're not really. It doesn't really change how much value there is there. But you see, they have 63% of the tickets, but 70% of the money. So that tells me there are some bigger bets on Washington State that agree with me, at least, even though I usually don't like to be on the team that's more public. You do have a ranked team here in Washington State going up against an Arizona team who is much worse than they are. So that, it's the type of play that I would tend to not want to actually look at and think that, a Washington State team that's ranked like that and has only one loss, they'd be overvalued. But if you look at the situation here, I think it's a really, really bad spot for Arizona, and that's why I'm doing this. Arizona was one of the teams where what they did last week, I was like, I have to look to go against them right away. Like, something's got to give here, man, even though it's not like Arizona's going to be totally unfocused having to play Washington State. Washington State is they're a ranked team. They're pretty good, but look at this gauntlet that Arizona has here. They just faced Washington, USC, and then after this, they have they have a bye, and then they have Oregon State and UCLA, and all those teams around this Washington State team, even though Washington State is a ranked team, all of those teams are more highly ranked than Washington State is. But what do you have for Arizona here? What are they coming off of last week? They played USC, and they were winning the game at USC as a 21-point dog. They were winning into the third quarter, I believe. Yeah, they were winning in the third quarter. They wind up blowing the game very late in the game, letting USC tie it. Or no, wait, letting USC get the lead, and then Arizona actually had to come back. Arizona was the one that tied it. So they put in all that effort to come back and retie it after they blew the lead. They put in all that effort. They came back, tied it right at the end. 2-point conversion, sent it into overtime, continued to battle, and the game wound up going 3 overtimes, at which point they finally succumbed. And you can see here they gained USC in the game, 506 to 365. Arizona, they played a huge game in that game, man. It was a big-time effort for them, and that was coming off playing Washington close as well. When you have a performance like that, you're going to be tired out, man. You're going to be gassed after that. That was a full effort from Arizona there. As soon as we saw that, and they wound up losing by 2 to USC in 3 overtimes, the way that they lost just that's a deflating loss. And coming on the heels of another like really tough max effort game, it's like how can you turn around and put in another effort like that the next week, going up to Washington State, another road game, second straight road game. It's a very, very brutal spot for Arizona here. And Washington State, on the other hand, they are coming off a loss to UCLA, where if you look at what was going on there, that was kind of a bad spot in a way for Washington State, because they were coming off their biggest game of the season, really, a big win in prime time, not prime time, it was a Saturday game, but they beat Oregon State as like a home underdog. That was a pretty big win for Washington State. Oregon State's one of the better teams in the Pac-12. And UCLA, I mean, it is still a big game, but that was a tough game. It was their first road game in conference, their only road game besides Colorado State, who wasn't a very good team at all. Washington State had to go in there and suffered, not a very great loss there to UCLA. So I think Washington State's in a much better spot here to kind of turn it around. I think they're in a bounce-back spot, even though you could argue, well, facing UCLA is kind of a tough game, and they do maybe have like a little bit of a look ahead to Oregon here. And I don't know, like when a team loses their like undefeated season, sometimes that can be like a loss that deflates them for multiple games. But I don't know if I really think so here. I think Washington State will actually show up focused. I think they know what Arizona did last week to USC, and Arizona, man, this is mostly just a fate of Arizona. Like, I just don't see how Arizona can turn around again after the way that that USC game played out. Just so much effort involved. They blow the lead in the second half, make the huge comeback, tie it again right at the end, and then go 3 overtimes. I think it's a very difficult spot for Arizona there. I like Washington State. I'm laying the points there with Washington State, -8. That's gonna be that's it for that one. Next up, Georgia State, -1. And this is going to be a spot where this is a play against Marshall more so than anything else. You can see here Georgia State has moved up a little bit from a pick 'em to -1. It's really just you're picking them to win the game, essentially, either way. I don't think that matters. They got 67% of the tickets, but 79% of the money. So it tells me some of the bigger money is on Georgia State. And again, I don't really necessarily like being where the majority of the money is and the majority of the public kind of is, but if it's more money than the tickets, and it kind of indicates some of the bigger bets are on that side with me, and it's a game that I don't think is bet very heavily because it's a smaller conference game, so there's not as much like action on it. It concerns me a little bit less, let's say. But if we look at the spot here, like what are we looking at here with Marshall and Georgia State? Marshall is coming off not only their first loss, although Georgia State, I believe, is also coming off their first loss. We'll talk about that in a second. Marshall is coming off a tough game against NC State where they played them pretty close. That was like basically their biggest opponent of the year, really. It was their one of 2 like big conference teams that they faced this year, and the other one was Virginia Tech, who's not as good as NC State, and they're down a bit this year, as I keep saying. So Marshall was actually the favorite in that one, but this NC State game, they were like a 6.5 point underdog or something on the road. That's a big game, probably the biggest game on the schedule, and they put in a big effort there, only to fall just short in that big game. Now they have a second game on the road against Georgia State, which I don't think is the back-to-back road games are kind of a difficult situation for a team to have to deal with as well. And up after that, they have James Madison, who's kind of the class of their conference here, the Sun Belt. James Madison, an undefeated team overall and in conference. That's another big game as well. That's bigger than the Georgia State game is, even though Georgia State's 4-1. They are 1-1 in conference, and I think we can look at what they've done, but I think they played a bit of a weaker schedule. So I think Marshall is in a spot where it's possible that they might not be totally focused here with the games that are surrounding this game for them. And you can see, Georgia State, their schedule's been a little bit weaker for sure. And what did we last see out of Georgia State? They lost to Troy, and it looks pretty bad. They only scored 7 points. People might look at that and think that's like a really ugly loss there. But Troy is a better team than what you would expect. There were reasons to like Troy in that game. Troy is kind of a sneaky team that's better than how they looked. And that was a game where it was like Georgia State hadn't really played anybody yet. Troy, I think, had played like a bit of a tougher schedule up to that point. So Troy was kind of the more tested team, and it was kind of known that Troy was like the better team. But now Georgia State, they come off of that. They get an extra week. They had a bye last week, so they get an extra week to kind of recalibrate themselves. Like I said with the other game I was talking about with Pitt also being on bye. I think the bye helps you when you're coming off a loss like that, because that loss can hurt your momentum a bit there, but that bye can then crack that like negative momentum a bit. And you got a team, Marshall, that's been playing pretty well. They've been playing well in the conference. You're probably going to be focused. You're going to be prepared coming out of that bye. So they had that extra week off, whereas again, like I said, Marshall had to play last week. They played NC State, which was a bit of a tough game there, tough opponent. They played pretty well, wound up only losing by 7, and they got James Madison up next. It's going to be tough. It's a tough spot for them. I like Georgia State in that one, so that's going to be the play there. And finally, another play where I'm playing against a team that I think is in a bad spot, and I'm playing North Carolina State. NC State against Duke. And here you can see this is kind of the type of market action there that or market read that I tend to look for here. We can see Duke is very public with 85% of the tickets on it, but only 52% of the money, which tells you they're the public team overall by quite a bit. But this tells you a lot of the like bigger money action is going completely against them, and the line has moved in a reverse fashion from 3.5 down to 3 in some spots. It's going against Duke there. And it's also a number where it's like Duke is only laying like 3.5, where it's almost like just picking the winner of the game, basically. And I think people are going to look and think Duke's the ranked team. They're the better team here. It just looks too easy to me, man. It looks too easy to lay the 3 with Duke to almost like just win the game. And the books are telling you that maybe Duke and NC State are almost like kind of even here in this game. And I think because Duke has been playing better than NC State recently, this is an in-state rival where you kind of get that like big brother, little brother situation. But I think that situation kind of flips between these two teams in football. And Duke is the team that has the upper hand right now. So they're kind of the team playing the big brother now, like they tend to do in basketball all the time. But in football, they're the ranked team now. They're 4-1, undefeated in conference, but 1-0. They're playing the bigger brother here, and I think NC State is going to be up for it, playing more of like the little brother role here. I think that's going to motivate NC State a little bit more here. But what do we have for Duke here? I think the situation for Duke is not good, even though they have had a bye. And, of course, I'm playing on 2 teams that were on a bye last week. Duke was on a bye last week, but what happened before that? They played Notre Dame. They played a really tough game. And, of course, you remember I was on Duke. I had Duke +6. Duke was winning the game 14-13 with a few minutes left. And then they gave up a touchdown and a 2-point conversion to not only lose, but not even cover the spread right at the end. That's a rough way to lose. And they did go into a bye after that, but I don't know, like they could still be in that like kind of like letdown / hangover mode coming out of that. And they do have NC State, which is an in-state rival, but if you look at what they have up next, they have Florida State, which is a gigantic game. Florida State, one of the best teams in the country as far as their ranking, ranked 4, and then Louisville right after that. So this is actually kind of a potential flat spot for Duke, even though NC State is the is an in-state rival of theirs. NC State hasn't really been impressing much, and as we just talked about, so I think NC State might have a little bit of value here. And as we talked about, NC State is coming off that game against Marshall where it looked like they didn't play very well. They had a close game. They had to kind of struggle against Marshall. But if you look at the spot that NC State was in that game, and this goes kind of both ways here. This is why, I think Marshall might look a little bit better than they are in that game, and NC State might look a little bit worse than they actually are because of that game. Because in that spot, NC State was in a bad spot because they were coming off a close loss to Louisville, who, as we know, Louisville has been playing really well. They're undefeated. They're in the rankings now. And NC State had Duke up next, which is a huge game for NC State, the in-state rival, ranked Duke team. So NC State was in a bad spot against Marshall. That was like kind of a sandwich spot for them there. So Marshall kind of took advantage of that, which is why I think Marshall might be a little bit overvalued in that game against Georgia State. So when you find situations like this, it can like put you on multiple different games kind of at once, all kind of looking at that same situation, which is also a thing that I kind of like to do, as you can see here. And I also like, like I'm doing with Duke here, I like to like play on a team one week and then potentially play against them the next week or something like that, like I'm doing with Duke here, just because like I think I'm playing on them because I think they're going to have like a big effort in that one game, and then I'm going to go against them in that next game when I think they might be in a spot where they might be a bit flat because they had that big like get up game in their last game, and now they might not be in as much of a get up spot here. So I think that is the case with Duke here. The market read looks pretty good to me there. So those are the plays for this week. I always wind up on 4, other than like the first couple of weeks of the season. Try to be consistent about it. Maybe it's autism. I don't know what it is really, but I kind of like find the 4 like strongest, and I'm like, those are what I'm going to be on. I don't know how I like determine where the cutoff is really. It's all kind of a feel anyway. But the 4 plays, to recap quickly: Pitt +8. One of the ugliest things that you can do, man. Just horrendously ugly there with Pitt. Washington State -8, Georgia State -1, and NC State +3.5. Those are the plays that I have there. And if we look at anything else of interest on the board here, I was potentially looking to go against Texas A&M as they come off a big game against Alabama, where Texas A&M was almost able to beat Alabama. They lost, I think, by 6 or 5 or something, by 1 score. That's a tough game to come off of, and it does look like the market is on Tennessee, but it almost looks too easy to lay the 3 with Tennessee, as Tennessee's ranked here, and Tennessee has Alabama up next, so there's kind of that like look ahead spot potentially for Tennessee there. I would still lean Tennessee there, but that kind of keeps me off of that game. Missouri against Kentucky is kind of an interesting game where Missouri, we really don't want to rehash what happened with them and Texas A&M earlier in the season, man, against Oregon. And Missouri last week against LSU, both of those teams covering like almost wire to wire. And then not covering right at the end because of a pick 6. In both situations, the team, all they have to do is not give up a defensive touchdown at that point. You're covering the spread and you have the final possession. All you have to do is not throw the pick 6. Texas A&M against Oregon in week 2 did exactly that, to fail to cover, and Missouri did it to me last week. Awful way to like start that like afternoon slate on Saturday for me, man. I feel like I should have gone 3-1 on Saturday, maybe even 4-0. We won't talk about the Cal game either, but that was just brutal. The market read here looks like it's ticket percentage all on Kentucky, but the money percentage all on Missouri, which is kind of crazy. So it looks like the market is telling you Missouri here. I wouldn't want to play Missouri the way they had that tough, like big effort game against LSU, and the way they lost that game at the end there. I would not want to play Missouri in a game like that. Kentucky, I don't think is in a great spot to play against them either, even though they kind of got embarrassed against Georgia, which was a game I gave that out as a lean. I thought Georgia would win by margin there, which they certainly did. But Kentucky, that's kind of a game where it's like Kentucky came crashing down to earth. And in a game like that, that could really be like deflating. So I think that's what we're seeing here with people not wanting to bet Kentucky here. That and the number just looks too easy to take Kentucky, because people have been high on Kentucky this year, even though they haven't really done anything. And now we saw once they played like a team that's actually good, they got their doors blown off. But the line's actually telling you here that Missouri might actually even be the slightly better team here. I'm not going to play it for those reasons that I said, but that's, a game of interest at least. And then Oregon-Washington is one of the huge games as well. Big primetime game. 2 ranked teams. 2 teams that can score quite a bit, even though they play decent defense too. I like Washington in this one. I think everybody's very high on Oregon. You can see here 61% of the cash and only 53% of the tickets. Tells me there are some of the bigger bets on Washington here. Washington, is a team that gets some public love as well. They have Michael Penix, one of the worst names in college football. He's a guy, I feel like he's been around like forever. Like I feel like he was playing on Indiana like 10 years ago. And if you look, I think he is like 23 years old and he's in his 6th year in college. It's like, what are you doing, man? Like, I think he's going to be in the NFL, but it's almost like he should already be there. He's playing really well this year, though. But that's, yeah, a situation there. I think Oregon like has more of the hype. People saw them just absolutely wreck Colorado, where everybody was hyping up so much that I just kind of think that that's going to make people perceive that Oregon is a little bit better than they actually are, and lend itself to there being some value on Washington there. In my opinion, that would be the case there. And yeah, I mean, I think that's probably all my analysis there. USC Notre Dame, it's interesting that Notre Dame has more of the money, but the ticket percentage is on USC there. I don't know what I would want to do with that game with Notre Dame. Because they lost, I believe they lost their second game last week. It was their second loss to Louisville, and I think Notre Dame is unaffiliated. They're not in a conference. And I think that game basically ended their playoff hopes, so I would not want to be on a Notre Dame team when that happens. And USC, as I talked about with Arizona, they looked bad against Arizona, but as I should have mentioned, Arizona might have looked a bit better than they actually are, because USC wasn't in a great spot there, because USC, they had this game upcoming, of course, against Notre Dame, which is a much bigger game. It's a rivalry game, and I think they might have had a bigger game in the game before that too. I can't remember, but yeah. So that wasn't the great. Oh yeah, they had Colorado, of course. That was a big game because Colorado's so hyped, and USC did actually like kind of blow them away, even though the score looks a lot closer than it was, because Colorado got back in it after USC kind of just put their they took their foot off the gas, and USC's defense is just not very good. But this was a down spot for USC against Arizona, which I think also is why Arizona played pretty well in that game. So another reason to go against Arizona this week, because I think they looked better than they actually were. So another reason to put me on Washington State there. But I mean, this is kind of telling me that the lean should be USC in the game against Notre Dame, but I don't want to play it. The market looks like it's going against that, but I would not want to play Notre Dame with their second loss. That could be like the dream crusher type of scenario there, where their playoff hopes are certainly ended with that loss at that point. Although Notre Dame, I mean, they're playing USC. It's not like they're not going to get up for a game against an undefeated, highly ranked USC team in a rivalry game. So there is that aspect of it. Notre Dame should still be at least focused in that respect, because it is still a big game, but there's still that dream crusher aspect to it going on there. And USC, potentially maybe even getting a little bit of value there, because they really did not look good against Arizona there. But those are my thoughts on it. We'll see what happens. Hopefully these plays do well and have fun. Good luck with all the plays. Have fun watching the games, man. I'm Toad. Better Off Dead. I'm Tower Gang Toad on Twitter. You can follow the Tower Gang Pod. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, Spotify. We're on Locals. If you want to support us at towergang.locals.com. We are the most offensive podcast on the planet. We are hilarious. We just did another episode tonight that I thought was quite fun and funny. Hopefully you guys, if you check that out, you enjoy it. Very offensive humor. Hopefully you enjoy that. And I'm going to give a shout out to my guys at flapper.net. I think it's .net because he said he was going to give me a shout out on his blog. Flapper, they are a blog. They do humor. I think they kind of do politics as well. They're in the libertarian sphere like I am in politics. So they do humor, and they do blog about football as well. So they have some football analysis up there that I find to be pretty funny. It's kind of like some sports mixed with comedy, and they like to mix it with sex appeal. They love the ladies over at Flapper, and who doesn't? They love the mommy milkers. They love the big boobs over at Flapper. So check out Flapper, my guys over there. That's gonna do it. Tower Gang Toad, baby. Better Off Dead. I'll be back with the NFL video, staying up to 4 a.m. again. Hopefully I'm a little bit more lucid tonight than I was last week or the last couple of weeks. Peace out, everybody. Better Off Dead.